Current U.S. policy has several components. I'd say you break it down between one, diplomatic isolation coupled with a strategy of economic isolation. The big component of economic isolation is a trade embargo that has been imposed on Cuba since the early 1960s, which means that the United States, by and large, cannot trade freely in any sorts of goods with Cuba. Now, there are some exceptions to that rule. In 2000, for example, they started allowing trade in food products and medicines on a limited scale. It's tough to pull off, but it happens, and so much so, in fact, that the U.S. is actually the largest provider of food imports to Cuba, which is a huge irony, given that the strategy is one of supposed isolation. And the other big component is diplomatic isolation. We have not had formal diplomatic relations with Cuba since the early 1960s. What that means is, here in Washington, for example, where we are now, countries from all around the world have their own embassies here, and they each have an ambassador that represents the interests of their country here, dealing with our government. We don't have that with Cuba. Cuba does not have that with us. The interesting thing about it is that in the late 1970s, there was some sort of an opening that happened. And what Cuba did actually, and what the U.S. did, they both established what are called interests sections in their respective capitals. These things are basically like embassies, but they're not called embassies. In fact, the U.S. interest section in Havana is housed in the same building that the U.S. embassy used to be in prior to the triumph of Fidel Castro and the Cuban Revolution.